Hi there, I'm Laurence Mollerup. Welcome back to Vancouver Bass Players. In my continuing series of exploring bass players of the Pacific Northwest of the United States, today I'm going to be talking with Tim Carey. Hi, Tim.
Hey there. How's
How
it
are you
going?
doing? Yeah, I'm
Oh,
good. We're all set up. We've got our boom arms and our mics, and it's that time, right, where we're all doing this online thing.
yeah, totally. That's been my entire life lately, has been from this room through this microphone. Pretty much all my work and everything I'm doing is happening here now, which is kind of a big change. But yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, I think adapting quickly and adjusting to the new environment and still making music matter and still making connections and communication is the big challenge in front of all of us for sure. So yeah, in the minutes before we actually started recording, we were talking about teaching, and I know you taught at Bellevue College and Cornish Institute. Um, I remember that place as the place where also like was Gary Peacock teaching there for a while, maybe in the '90s or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Gary Peacock was there. He came over with Jay Clayton. There's the jazz program there was started by a guy named Jim Knapp, who is a composer and trumpet player and author and just a wonderful. He was my main mentor when I was there. And when he started the program, he brought a bunch of people over from New York to teach there. Jay Clayton was the main vocal person, and Gary Peacock was one of those people who came over and taught theory there. Um, when he left, I think he actually left to play with Keith Jarrett.
Not a
That's
bad gig.
Yeah, that's what I remember someone saying is that
Yeah.
he left for to play with Keith, and then he was replaced by a woman named Margie Pose, bass player, who also studied with, and she was an incredible teacher. And then when I got hired, I ended up taking the class that Gary taught. Which was kind of scary, to be completely honest. But it was just like a jazz theory and arranging class that I was teaching there, and yeah, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed my time at Cornish. It was cool to be able to focus just strictly on jazz and pop theory and arranging rather than not having to, but rather than doing counterpoint and Roman numeral analysis and the kind of stuff I did in college. It was cool to be able to focus more just on jazz style harmony and how to think about that and how to approach that. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, right. And I think connecting with the students as well in that way, and bringing in all kinds of different influences is a great thing to be able to do, because then you can engage them. If you're broad, you can engage them in lots of different ways.
Yeah, that was one of the best things about it. Um, Another cool thing about it was a lot of the students, since we were all kind of in the same mindset in terms of our musical goals, which was a great thing for an institution. A lot of the students ended up becoming my friends, or nowadays people who I play and record with regularly. So it's kind of like a community. It wasn't so much like teacher-student relationships, but it was very much like I just had a bit more experience. I'm going to share my experience, and now we're sort of on the same level. So yeah, it was great. Really enjoyed it.
One of my mentors and friends, Sal Ferreira, is up here in Vancouver. He always had this quote when at VCC when he used to work there, and he would give the sort of orientation speech. It would always be, "I love to turn a student into a colleague." And that's his favorite part of the education process.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can say the same thing. That's sort of how we operate a lot of times. Our students end up being lifelong bandmates, and it's so rewarding, right? And like I get to be now when I teach and when I play the old guy who's been on the stand for a long time, teaching the young guy that I used to be,
Yeah.
because I always played with older players, right? It was like that's the standard thing in jazz, is especially with bass. It seems like you're the guy who's 17 and doesn't mind playing quarter notes for 4 hours, while everybody else solos,
That
and
is
I definitely followed that path, and hopefully now I've got some experience to pass on. So yeah, very very cool community situation to be working in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, are you still teaching at this point? Are you doing online lessons like a lot of people are?
Yeah. Yeah, I teach. I have a fairly full studio of online private students in both bass, guitar, and music production, which is something that I spend a lot of time doing. And then I teach at a place called the Jazz Night School here in Seattle.
Okay, cool.
Right now is online, but it's traditionally like an ensembles, from the community get together and then they hire pros to come in and coach the ensembles.
Well, that
So,
sounds fun. Yeah.
oh, it's super, super cool. In fact, in a lot of ways, I like it more than the accredited institutions that I work for, mostly because everyone who's there is there only to get better. I mean, they have no other, you're not going to get a degree, so there's no, you know, motivation outside of just wanting to get better at playing jazz.
Right.
And that makes for a really great ensemble experience where everybody's invested and trying to improve together. So doing that online right now, doing an ear training course and a Brazilian music um, overview type of course. And then now that the school year's out, that's about it. When the school year's going, I teach at a high school where I directed a jazz band.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of I've been doing that for 10 years now, and since COVID started, it kind of turned into a jazz history class, you know.
Good
Uh,
idea. Yeah.
yeah, which is cool because that's the kind of thing that I always wanted to have time to teach them anyway,
Right.
but it would always just manifest as, oh, we're going to do a tune by, Duke Ellington. Let's talk briefly about Duke Ellington. The cool thing about switching to online was that they had to research Duke Ellington for a week. So it's a little it's a little bit more in depth. I enjoy that.
Yeah, so that's adapting to the situation. That's again, like I think coming to the online teaching initially for a lot of us, there was resistance and going, how is this even going to work? We're losing this sense of one-on-one that being in the room with somebody gives us. And then, so finding ways to expand on things that you always wanted to do and couldn't, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
definitely fun. So yeah, a lot of teaching. That's been my main thing. I mean, I've been a teacher. I think I started teaching bass when I was 16 or 17. I grew up in a really small town, so it was like there was the other kids in town that wanted to learn to play bass. So I would just teach like the middle school kids when I was in high school. And then right out of college, that was my full-time private teaching gig. I got a job at a music store, and I've been doing that now for what, 17 years, 15 years, something like that, full
Yeah,
time.
and I also like you briefly mentioned your music arranging, and I think that was a really cool post the other day that where you went live and sort of showed your last year of learning in Logic and the EDM stuff. I found it really interesting because I don't know a lot about that music, and me, I probably won't get into Logic as deeply as you did, but it sure is a fascinating tool that I've just re-engaged with now, and it's really quite generous of you to share that and sort of show some of the mixes and ways you got sounds and also the songs you modeled on. So I'll put a link up there if you've got anything on YouTube. I'll share some of that music as well because I think it's really interesting. And like you talked about, this is how I thought EDM sounded, and you had sort of like some horns, I think, on one track, or you had a vocal part that this doesn't quite fit, and that evolution was really cool to hear about.
Yeah, thanks for watching that video though. That was fun. I might do another thing similar to that in the future, just because, yeah, it has been kind of crazy. I mean, I'm actually glad you brought that up because I mean, a year ago, I had been working in Pro Tools and Logic for 10 years, but all of my experience in that software had been, I have an external musical idea, like an arrangement or some bass line or something that I want to record, so I would just learn the software well enough to do that minimum thing that I needed to get done. And then everything else, I would hire somebody. So if I needed it to be mixed or mastered or anything like that, I would, shell out a bunch of money. And about a year ago, yeah, I just decided, well, hey, like, what if I just tried to learn it? Like, I just kind of overcame my fear. I always had this feeling that, like, since I'm a bass player, since I spend all my time doing the, tactile playing of the instruments, all that other stuff is for somebody else. And I kind of just figured, no, I should just do it. And it's been a wonderful journey of realizing I'm terrible and then working harder and, just trying to get better and better. And I feel like it's starting to get to the point where I'm starting to make stuff that I'm proud of, and it's cool. Once COVID hit, I was like, wow, that good thing I kind of set myself up for being able to work at home. That was the other thing, because now I'm even though I haven't played a gig in 3 or 4 months, I'm still making music, and I'm still able to collaborate with people, and I'm still able to produce new stuff. So that's a great thing.
I love it. It's interesting. I have a gig tonight.
Really?
Yeah, and like with people and other musicians. Yeah, I'm playing this with this brass octet. So it's like brass and this one bass player in the back. And it's at the planetarium. It's outdoors, and there's a minimum audience, and everybody has to be spread out. And it was the first rehearsal was just like, wow, people, and like catching up with friends that you've played with for years, and it had this really surreal quality. I remember like putting the bass in the car and thinking, wow, I've always hated putting the bass in the car. But because you're seeing things for the first time, right? It's like I always had this image that COVID will be over at some point and we'll just be back to normal. But more and more I see that we're just adapting to something, and at least up here in BC, restrictions are being lifted and we're all being super careful. So things look pretty good for our recovery, but it's slow, and it's like, okay, now every day I got to think about elevator buttons, and every journey I make, that's a 3 doorknob journey, or that's a 2 doorknob journey, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So when you work, do you work pretty much completely in Logic, and do you like? I'm still learning. So are there like sample libraries that you've bought and augmented it with, or how does that work out?
It's been an evolution
Yeah.
for sure. So so right now at this point, yeah, I only use Logic, and I have a pretty big, I'm not like a film composer level or anything like that, but I have a pretty big collection of sample libraries and software synthesizers that I use. And I've collected them slowly. So when I first started about a year ago, I should say when I first started a year ago, what I mean by that is that's when I made the decision to spend at least 20 hours a week producing original music.
This is the part I found really fascinating. It's just like being a musician, and and I know about tracking practice, right, and keeping yourself accountable. And I love that you did that to yourself. You went, okay, if I'm going to do this, it's 20 hours a week, and you're clocking the time.
Yeah.
That's
And I
pretty
scheduled the
fantastic.
time, and I made sure that I got in my hours every week. And I made a secondary goal to finish 2 original recordings a week, 2 songs.
And did you have someone you had to submit to so that you had an external sort of accountability as well, or?
Yeah, I did. I signed up for a service where I submit the music for review and possible placements, which I still use the service. Not as much because it happened a lot faster than I thought it would, but I started getting like actual work pretty quickly.
Cool.
Yeah, which was great. So now I do about half that and half stuff for other people, just production work. But yeah, when I first started, it was only stock Logic stuff, just what came with Logic, and it was because I like most people, I use the internet to get information. So I'd go on YouTube or I'd read blog posts or whatever, and everybody always said, you really don't need anything other than the minimum stuff to make great music. So you should just learn to use that stuff. And I agree with that. But I also think that telling people that is kind of like telling people, let's see if I can come up with a good metaphor. Like
How about like, like
you could build a house out of popsicle sticks
yeah,
that you could live in.
yeah,
You could,
yeah.
but it would take 80 times as long, and so that's kind of what I learned was there are things that do make my recordings sound better. So yeah, I've just been slowly buying stuff and collecting stuff, and
Yeah, I imagine it's like with instruments, I'm always telling people just get a good Fender start off, with jazz or P bass and learn to play that really well if you're an electric player and just stick with it for a while. And you don't need, but here I am surrounded by tons of different instruments. And so that's part of that thing I imagine the same way is finding your sounds and your voices. And the other thing I found interesting, like thinking about film music, I remember listening. This is a while back, but it was a composer named Patrick Caird who's moved to LA now. He's become really famous. But I remember listening to music with him probably somewhere in the '90s. I don't remember what session it was, and he heard a sound on a track someone was playing, and he went, "Oh, D50, Roland D50," and I thought, "Wow, that's a set of ears, right?" And that's also knowing the eras and the gear and being able to pick it out. So there's a whole other level of finding what sounds you want to make and what tools get you there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's very
it's a
cool.
wonderful process. Learning how to use synthesizers in and of itself has been an awesome journey that yeah, I never thought that I would be into it. For most of my life, I was anti-synthesizer, 100%. I was like, everything should be acoustic. We want acoustic instruments here. And now I can sit with a synth and geek out for hours and have fun coming up with cool sounds. And yeah, it's fun.
They're all means of expression. I mean, ultimately, right? And yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just like it's sort of like any snobbery I've had about music eventually gets worn away as I keep interacting with the musical world,
Hmm.
and like jazz snobbery and classical snobbery and country western snobbery and all the rest of it. It just kind of fades the more reality intrudes and goes, no, you can't do that. You actually love all this music. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Totally.
So, did you want to show me something about bass playing this morning? That's one of the things that's been really fun in these interviews is to get shown some stuff, and I've been in and out of my comfort zone plenty of times. So, one of the things I remember I was going to mention was I'm not very good at tapping yet, and I'm not trying to direct you that this needs to be the lesson, but I want everybody to check out the video that I'm going to post. There'll be a little eye up in that corner with Tim and Amanda Taylor doing "Put Your Records On," which was just fantastic bass and voice with multi-track voice and background vocals. Really, really sweet version of the. It's is it Karina Bailey? I'm trying to remember the exact name.
Corey, Corin Bailey Ray, I
Bailey
think.
Ray, that's right, Corinne Bailey Ray. So that song and you guys covered it and that was I think where I met you at least online. That's where
Yeah.
you meet anybody now is online. And you sent me the two-handed tapping part, and I had a really great student at the time, Colin Sankey, and he actually learned it, and then he transcribed the background vocals and arranged his jury and his recital to play that song, and it just went over really well. So thanks
which
for
was
that.
which
But
was
yeah,
super. Yeah.
I'm willing to learn anything outside of that as well. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was thinking about this because I watched your other videos and you asked some of the bass players to share some bass playing stuff. And I was kind of having a hard time thinking about what to do. But since you brought that up, I can show you that. One thing I did want to mention is this thing that I've been doing a lot lately with my students, and it's a new addition to my teaching. So I just wanted to put it out there, which is this idea of musical. I call it musical meditation.
I love it.
Yeah, and the idea here is that, as bass players, particularly jazz bass players, we take a lot of solos. In the music I play, I tend to take a lot of solos. And one thing I've noticed over the years is that if I'm soloing, if I'm thinking about what I'm playing too much, it tends to sound not like the phrasing isn't as good.
Yeah.
It ends up sounding like a bunch of chunks of notes or kind of disjunct things trying to just fit the chord changes rather than like a fluid phrase. And I don't like that. So I wanted to try to find a way to get less of my brain into my actual execution. And what I found is over the years when that is my goal, so let's say I'm trying to learn like a long piece of music that's written out, kind of like that Corin Bailey Ray thing actually, where I
Oh,
had written that entire thing out before I even started learning it. Um, which is something that I should mention. I do that a lot. I actually will write the whole arrangement down by hand or on Finale and then learn it.
Right.
rather than like do it all at the same time.
So you're moving
Uh,
from a composer mindset and then making yourself be the artist who executes the composition rather than letting the bass lead. I think that's a brilliant thing to
yeah.
point out. Yeah.
That is a technique that I've been doing since I first started playing bass because I learned to read music and everything before I started playing bass. I took saxophone lessons when I was in like third grade. So when I started playing bass, I already had a background in reading. So at the beginning of this, you said if there was like one piece of advice I would give students, it would be learn to read music. Straight up. Straight up. That's like the most important thing in my opinion because not only can you then take that music and learn to play it, but you understand rhythm at a much, much deeper level if you understand how to read rhythm. That's for me, that's the biggest thing. But so the musical meditation idea, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent,
No,
is
it's good.
basically you take something that you're practicing. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a 2/5 lick, could be an arpeggio, could be a scale, could be a tapping tech, could be anything that you're learning that you're just having a tough time smoothing out, making it sound natural. So I'll just use like what was the one I was doing the other day? Like oh, my input on this bass is a little funky.
Oh,
So like something like that. So just say like two arpeggios, and then you kind of figure out what your hand is going to do, right? And then as you're practicing it, you try to get it up to a speed that's challenging. And this morning, I'm kind of embarrassed. Uh, something like that. You try to practice it and loop it over and over again while either thinking about something unrelated in extreme detail. So if I'm by myself, the thing I like to do is use an orange. So I'll like play these arpeggios or play these scales. There we go. And I'll try to like hold a conversation with somebody while I'm playing this arpeggio, right? Or I'll try to read something on my phone, or do something that's not engaging my brain in any way,
yeah.
but just have my muscles continually do this thing.
Yeah.
What I've found is when I was learning like classical pieces when I was younger, when I was doing like transcribing a solo and trying to learn to play the whole solo, this was one of the final steps before I felt like I had mastered the thing,
Yeah.
right? So now I try to do that when I practice generally, when I'm just practicing. I'll try to distract myself, right? And I think it's it's just a mindset thing, but it does have a big impact on the retention and the ability to then manifest those ideas in real time when you're soloing or when you're improvising,
Yeah.
because it's not really a thought process, it's just a movement.
Yeah, you're driving it into an automatic zone where there isn't the need for the cognitive function to be there, right? You're doing something. It's funny because we always like I know what I want to say is confusing, but we're as teachers we're always trying to make everything more conscious, right? Oh, move your hands this way to get that kind of sound. Is that the kind of crescendo you want? Or what are your note lengths? And get people to think about them. So that in a way, this is counterintuitive, but absolutely important because when Sonny Rollins plays a solo, he's not going, oh, D diminished, D F A flat,
Exactly. Yeah. It's just,
right?
yeah, it gets more to the heart of that.
Mm.
So, it's like I'm kind of just making this up right now, but I think it's relevant, which is like on one level, you're thinking about every single thing you play
Yeah,
in detail. I'm playing the seventh, I'm playing the third, I'm playing, and then on the next level, it's more like you're just hearing it and then your hands do it.
yeah,
And that's kind of where I've always wanted to be. And, you never really get all the way there necessarily, but you can get really close. But then on an even higher level than that is you feel the gesture or the phrase as almost like an emotion. I know that seems a little cheesy, but it's like you just feel the meaning, not the sound.
yeah,
And then your hands take over and produce the adequate musical idea or thought that represents that feeling. And I think people who've been playing music for a long time, particularly improvised music, know exactly what I'm talking about right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
It's you're soloing and it's like now this, and it happens and it's perfect. But other times you'll be like, all right, now I'm going to play this awesome altered dominant phrase that I've practiced all week, and you just totally eat. You just don't do, it doesn't come out.
Leaves you flat and there's no payoff to it emotionally, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I'm seeking, and that's all. I feel like in music, that's one thing that I'm always kind of after is that intangible. Um, Emotion is a good word for it, but it's more than that. It's like an idea, it's like a thought, like some kind of meaning that comes across in the music, and that can happen with any instrumentation, any technique. Doesn't really matter. It's more about, I think, the intention and the context and things like that. So that way of practicing, I like doing it that way, and I highly recommend. But let's talk about the tapping thing real quick.
Well, before you move on to that, because I do want to do that. That'll be an easier lesson for me than the other one. The other one is so big, right? To
Yeah.
do that in a short video is going to be tricky. But I was going to say, just before you move on, I have this theory that there are words missing from all languages except maybe German, because Germans seem to be really good at words like Schadenfreude, and now it's in common use, right? What is that exactly? That's like your happiness at the misfortune of others. It's a great term, right? And so there's probably another term like that in German for this, for the idea of motions and gestures, and these things we can't quite get language to do it. But I think there's a word there somewhere we've got to find, or maybe we need to call it the Tim Carey word, because it gets so hard to communicate, even among musicians. It's dancing about architecture. It's that situation over and over again, and like you said, everybody knows what it means, but to be able to identify it and put a language tag on it is so challenging.
And if there's any younger bass players watching this right now, I don't know if this might sound like I'm speaking to myself 15 years ago, 20 years ago. If you're wondering why there are all these bass players out there who aren't flashy and are not playing all this stuff, but are getting the gigs, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why. It's something that you can't. It's not like a technique. It's time on the instrument and time with music in general. Like doing it and living it. And it's the same thing I tell my ear training students. It's like, you're not going to be able to identify every chord progression just by reading about or listening to them one or two times. I mean, it takes years of repeated. So, yes. I don't want to get too into that and start.
No, that's it. That's it.
Your training students,
And and I'll add, we'll go on, but it's the correct repetition, right? And repetition can be such a problem when you're doing music, and somebody's learning and they repeat the mistake over and over again instead of going, oh, it's actually the octave note is the one. So that would be A, and that could be on the 7th fret of the D string, and I can play it with my pinky finger and my first finger in the right hand. Okay. Right. It's like getting yourself to slow down enough to go, okay, where's the issue, and what am I going to do before you act, super consciously, and then it becomes that automatic process. I think there's so much to that about repeating in the right way.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. It should be correct. That's why I stopped doing this earlier, because I was messing it up. Yeah, great. So that's a big one. Yeah, the tapping thing. I can tell you all about that. I never. Let's see.
You know what? I do have a question about that song, because you're in A, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's an A.
So it's something like, I think it's something like if that's the sort of tonality, right, where the right hand does that kind of rhythm. Mm-hmm. But the question I had was, there's a bridge, and I'm not going to take away from your planned lesson, so we'll do that too. But in the bridge, you play these like really beautiful voicings, and it's kind of like, you know, I didn't transcribe it yet, but the right hand part is also really cool. So let's do a twofer here. Let's do both things.
Let's see if I can remember that. Are you talking about put your records on?
Yeah, yeah. So there was this part in the middle that was really arpeggiated, and all four fingers in the right hand. Um,
Yeah.
it's a while. I watched it again last night, but just thinking about maybe we can tie into the right hand. But let's go with what you had planned, because I sense I might be derailing your train of thought with the other topic.
No, I'm trying to remember. That was my favorite part of the arrangement, the part you're mentioning.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
part?
yeah.
I can't remember exactly what the changes are.
That's okay.
I know
Let's
there's a B
do.
minor chord in there somewhere.
People
I
will
remember
listen
how.
to it and transcribe it and send you emails.
Oh yeah, I actually have it all written down on a. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll pull it up in a second. We'll check it out.
Okay.
But okay, it's been forever since I played this. Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, That's what this thing was about. So I had to during that whole period where I was doing a lot of this tapping stuff, um, which I haven't done in a while, but I went through like a good like 2 or 3 years where it's pretty much all I did.
Mm,
Um, my main goal with every arrangement was to try to find a way to put a backbeat in it.
cool.
Right? Was because without if it's just bass and voice, if there's no backbeat, in my mind anyway, the average listener would not know what to listen for or what I was doing. Like
Right.
they needed that thing.
Yeah.
So that was the main thing, was coming up with a groove where I could throw in a backbeat. Then that was the main one. And then the changes I think are like I forgot the changes already.
You know what? I've got it here. If you want, I can share it.
Sure.
But that's your writing, so I don't want to share it without that being okay.
No, yeah, share it. Please do.
Okay. So this is the first time in one of these interviews where I've done share screen. This is kind of exciting. Let's see how that looks. Have you guys got it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So
There it is.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, so I wrote it for six string. Oh, that's right. Okay, so this was actually kind of difficult. And then what is this? This is that weird F sharp chord thing. Then it goes to an E chord, it's sus, right?
yeah.
Uh, that's right. Now it's coming back to me. Then it goes to the D chord, right? Or the F sharp minor. Oh yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, so I just basically took that groove and kept that going throughout the whole thing. The the challenging parts about this, in my opinion, are that first chord. This one is one. There's a bunch of these chord voicings that I had to practice a lot. This is one of them. So it's E, G sharp, and C sharp. So it's like just A major seven. But the tricky part about it is your fingers have to be like that
Right.
to get that to work, right?
Yeah. So I don't have a C string on this bass, but that's almost near the end of the fingerboard on this one. So the 5 is on your index finger.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's meanwhile. So I guess I'd have to play the A on my B string.
Yeah. And
Yeah. So getting the shape right is
it's
half the
tricky.
battle. Yeah.
Hmm.
How are you making the backbeat? You mentioned that boom, doom, chick, yeah, and
So,
so is that a slap thing, or how do you do that?
so that is actually when I do it correctly, and I could tell you the number of times I recorded that video. I should say this because I never have said this publicly, but everything that I did with Amanda that you'll see if you watch the YouTube videos, they're
Yep.
all recorded in one take,
Wow.
straight through with zero editing.
Love it.
Yeah. And so they took me a long time. I recorded each one of those things like 100 times at least.
Many video files to delete afterwards.
Yes,
Oh, the wrong
many,
one. Oh no.
many hours. Luckily for me, at the time I was living by myself, and I had a video studio basically set up in my apartment where I had like a green screen and lights and
Perfect.
cameras, and my recording, everything was set up all day long, all the time. Um, when I do it correctly, the idea, what I'm trying to do, and I do it most of the time pretty accurately, is similar to it's called on banjo, it's called frailing, which is a technique where you pick the string in a downward motion with your fingernail,
Okay.
like
So
that.
like sort of that motion.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Victor Wooten where he just kind of like hits the bass like that.
Hmm.
But ideally, you would either stop on the string above. So right here, I'm doing it on my G string, and I'm just hitting the string like that, and I just do that while muting the bass. And that's kind of that's the plan. And the reason I arrived at that is that if I'm in this position, I can do it quickly, right? And then there's also an up thumb for the doubles. So, uh, uh, yeah,
So that move there, that's what I'm interested in. The so it's going to be thumb and then two thumbs. Boom, tick a boom. How are you doing that?
so I'll try to do it slowly. Just that. So,
Nice.
so it's yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's down with the finger, up with the thumb, and then a hammer
Okay.
in there.
That move in itself has always flummoxed me. I haven't investigated it, but that way of making the drumming happen on the bass, it's sort of like on upright when you do little dib at the ball, those drops and things like that that just come naturally raking across the string. For me, never really translated to electric, and it's interesting. Maybe because I'm an older player than you. I remember doing some of my first sessions, and if I went like, it was like, don't ever do that, because you don't want anything on the backbeat because the drummer's doing that and you're going to flam and it's going to, throw everything off. So I was probably, I was taught early on not to do that kind of move. So it's really interesting to be thinking about, well, there's no drummer. I'm the drummer now.
Yeah.
And, getting that move together.
You know what the song that kind of first got me doing that was "Me and My Bass Guitar" by Victor Wooten.
Oh, that's such an amazing piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to play it, but I do know that at one point in that song, also in the one that I did learn once, the whatever that is, you can't hold no groove.
Right.
He does this technique where it's hammer, thumb, ah, that thing,
Yeah.
that kind of groove. I should have practiced that before I demonstrated it, but
Sounds
whatever.
great.
So I do that a lot actually when I play bass now. I kind of stole that from Victor, and for me it manifests with that thing. So like stuff like that, just like a little percussive sound between, with a lot of
It actually reminds me when you talked about Brazilian music before, that almost has that kind of foro thing where you swing it. It's not checka 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 checka, but every little one of those has a little displacement that makes it swing. And so probably because of the way your motion of your arm is across the strings, there's a really cool swing and articulation just built into a simple technique like that. It's pretty cool.
that's true. Yeah, it sounds cool. That's why I like it. But the way I got, so one thing a lot of people don't, there's two things since I have you here. There's two things. First thing is a lot of people think tapping doesn't come in handy outside of like fancy bass playing, and I can tell you that that is not true. I actually have a lot of people who hire me to play that want me to do that on the gig.
Right.
So it is worth practicing.
Yeah.
People do like it. I have some piano players that I play with who like hiring me because it allows them to stop playing piano and play a different instrument or sing on the gig, because I can, over the years I've learned how to basically play like any chord progression two-handed on my bass, right? So I can kind of like sight read through a tune and just kind of keep the changes going, while someone's singing or playing another instrument. So that's the first one. The second one is everything I just said about tapping is also true about slap bass.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, I used to think anyway too, that me practicing slap bass was just for me, and I was wrong. A lot of people really like it and really enjoy when you do it on a gig. So, you know.
It's appropriateness. I think is the bottom line, and I agree. For me, the sort of stay in your lane thing that we do with bass, and I've done it myself. I've said, hey, you need to practice, getting that together. I've said it plenty of times, and it's all true. And it's like being ready for anything as a sign of an evolved. You've been at it long enough, and you can do the simple thing, but you also have stuff to say, and you can fill in multiple roles. I also think there's a certain kind of mentality to this, and that's going back to what you originally said about writing things that you couldn't play yet, that I just love, where you're coming at all of this from, I want this musical idea. Not, this is shiny and cool, so I'm going to just slather it on everything, right? I'm going to put like peanut butter and jelly on everything I eat because I like the taste. It's about going, okay, well, that's my target. I like that sound and it fits here, and using it in an appropriate way. Like, it's funny because watching these videos, there's been, Jared, for sure, Jared Smith from Archspire showed me a lot about tapping in the first lesson. And there's been others that have mentioned it. Mike Young mentioned it when I did the Mother interview. And he said the same thing as you, really. It's like people are surprised, and they actually want that because they can get ordinary bass with Logic quite easily, right? And if they want personality and character, they're often looking for, what do you got? What things can you do that I can't do with Logic already, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is your, you have anything to share about getting through this time? And
So, yeah, when this all happened, it was kind of an interesting time for me, just because I was just finishing up an album and just getting started with a new band that I was really excited about playing with, who we haven't done anything. We played one gig, and then this all happened. And having come off what I consider to be a pretty successful year as a musician, just in terms of gigs and releases and doing things, I kind of told myself at the beginning of this quarantine, once it became obvious that it was going to be longer than just a week or two, that I needed to not put pressure on myself to do pretty much anything except stay healthy. So good things that have happened. I've been working out more. I've been cooking at home a lot more and learning how to cook. I've been, well, to a certain degree. I mean, I'm not like a great chef or anything, but I've been cooking more. Just trying to take better care of myself and not try to avoid that feeling of needing to be overly productive or more productive, and in fact, being okay with being less productive.
yeah,
Because I consider myself a pretty resilient person in terms of an optimistic. So if things are going bad, I tend to have this view of life as being mountains and valleys. So if things are going great, I always try to remind myself, like, they're not always going to be going great. And when things aren't going great, I try to remind myself the only place we can go from here is up. So let's be positive and try to move forward. And with this stuff, it was just, with this, it's kind of been like reminding myself it's okay to feel overwhelmed, extremely stressed out, extremely tired. You're going through a global pandemic right now. Like, and I don't want to say I was prepared for it emotionally, because I wasn't, but I'm okay with having days where I just wake up and say, you know what, I'm just going to be sad today
Mm.
and not work and just be sad and read a book,
Yeah.
like, so that's been a big one. People who know me personally know that I am notoriously like an obsessive overachieving person when it comes to goals that I set for myself. So I've tried to not set any goals for myself, basically.
I love it. It resonates for sure what you say there, Tim. That's really and you know what I keep hoping is that every time I ask that question of somebody, that it's going to be by the time anybody watches it, they'll be, oh, I remember that time. And for me, that's one of the things that drives me forward is going, there'll be something different at the end of this, and not necessarily worse, right? That this
Yeah.
will come to an end, and life will maybe never be normal, but there is this adjustment. And like I was telling you before, in BC, things are starting to open up a little, and it's fast for me. I'm kind of like, hang on, I'm just getting used to binging Netflix with my family, which I'd never had time for before. Don't take all this away. I'm kind of feeling cautious about the prospect of reopening. So
I can relate to that. It's been wonderful spending time with my fiance. I mean, I'm actually getting married in 2 weeks.
oh, congratulations. That's
Oh, thanks.
awesome. Do you need a
Yeah.
band? I'll be your one man band.
No, we're doing a really, really small thing, but yeah, that's actually been probably the best part about this. If there was a good part, is that me and my fiance Ashley have been together every day, all day for the last couple months, and it's awesome because we both work a lot, so it's great. That's like probably the best thing about it.
It's been really great hanging out with you today, and getting to know you a little bit better. I will definitely be watching more of your videos as they come up, and going back and reviewing some of the YouTube stuff, especially knowing it's one take. That's a lot of effort, man.
Yeah, yeah, that was I don't know why I did it all in one. I think I know why. It was for me. It was because I wanted to have that there for the
Yeah.
future reference. Like I did that, I performed that, which each one of those we did 10 of them, and all of them for me were an opportunity to get better at the bass. I wrote not all of them, but most of them. The very first one that a lot of people haven't seen is our version of Beautiful Love.
Right.
And that one, in my opinion, was the most difficult one to do, was the hardest, like the most technically challenging one of
I'm going
them.
to check. That's one I've not gotten to yet, so I'll check that one out after this. And yeah, so launching in with a tough one is always a cool way to do a project, right? Both feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually how the whole project started. I had written an arrangement of Beautiful Love for bass and saxophone. And it was just in my spare time. And then I was working with Amanda in a band where she was the lead singer and I was a bass player. And I was like, "Hey, you want to do this thing?" And it just turned into this whole series of videos and all that stuff. And
And it'll be linked there with the little eye in the corner when I put this on YouTube. Okay, thanks so much, Tim, and we'll check in again soon. Thank you so much.
hey, thank you, Lawrence. This was really cool to hang out, man, and chat and get to know each other a little bit.
We'll
Really
do more for sure.
awesome. Really appreciate it. Okay, well, have a great weekend, and I'll see you around.